Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's demo, A Recipe for Proposal Success with Red Team and Deltek. I'm Scott Van Erden, a marketing specialist here at Deltek. Joining me today is Charlie Schaefer, proposal consultant from Red Team Consulting. Welcome, Charlie, and thanks for joining us today.
A few months ago, Deltek contacted Red Team, and we were working on a partnership to figure out how we can use their powerful collaboration tool called Kona to better develop proposals. So we looked at the tool and we looked at some ways to build in our best practices with Kona, and we found it actually aligns really, really well, and we've been using it since then with our clients and some of our internal functions. So to give you an idea of basically how you could use Kona to develop proposals, I'm going to use an actual example from a real RFP, PMSS2, which came out about 7 years ago, but a lot of people bid on, so I'm hoping a few of you are familiar with it. And I'll actually show you individual steps of how you can use Kona to manage individual parts of the proposal. I'm going to do a bit like a cooking show, so I'm going to show you basically the idea behind something, but then I'll show you a much more finished product at the end so you can see what it would look like if you were actually using Kona to manage a product. So let's jump right in. The first thing you're going to need to use Kona to manage a proposal is you're going to want to create a space. And a space is just basically a workspace in Kona that you can use to administer a project, and you can do all sorts of things within a space that I'll show you. You could theoretically manage more than one bid with just a single space, but we kind of recommend to use one space per bid. It's going to make more sense that way. You can name your space, so let's just name it PMSS2. You can even add an image to it if you'd like to kind of brand it so you can quickly notice it. Kona has a lot of pre-made images, and you can also pull something from your own. That's an option. You can get a description of what you're going to do here. So you can label it. And then the next, you can give some guidance on how to use the space. For proposals, it's probably going to be the same guidance over and over again. You can add content here or not. The next step is to invite other people into your this space so they can collaborate with you. So you're going to have a space to work in, but then you need to bring people in so they can actually develop the proposal and collaborate with you. The way to do that is you can do it upon the creation of the space, and you'll actually have the option to do it anytime after that as well. So if you have a Kona account, then you're going to be able to immediately pull people from your Kona network. It's really easy to do, and you can select more than one. So I'm just going to add a few people for my company, just to illustrate how it works. I can add a message. And I'm going to send them the invites. And they're going to notice in Kona and an email that they've been invited to a space. Voila, we created a space. If you ever need to invite other members, you can just use the invite button right here, and you can send it to not only people in your network, but out of their network, and they use the guest account. And they can, when they use a guest account, then they're only going to work in your space, and they have limited rights, but they'll actually pretty much be able to do everything you need them to do to participate in proposal development. Another neat function, an important function in Kona, is you have the ability to manage users and put them in groups. To add a group, it's really easy. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but the easiest way is just to click Add Group. And just give you an idea of how this would be useful. Let's say you have a team that's just doing the technical approach. So you can create a group called Technical, and you just drag people down. And they went right into the technical group. Now, it doesn't seem very useful right now, but you'll see later that when you have discussions or you assign tasks or you create events in Kona or share files, you have the ability to limit who can see it and who participates in it. So it's a lot easier to assign things to groups if it's a large group, and also handle permissions like subcontractors. So if you are working in a teaming environment and it's appropriate to show things to one subcontractor but not another, like pricing information, then you can create this group, and then you can share it with only that group, and no one else other than the people that you've shared it with are aware of its existence. So it's very useful for proposal development. While we're on the topic of files, I'm going to show you how to create and share files. So in proposals, you're obviously going to need to share your solicitation. and have a place to develop drafts, have documents on win themes, and all those various items that you'll need to develop a proposal. This works a lot like basically any operating system would in terms of file storage. You can build folders. We recommend that, although you don't have to. But just adding some basic folders like government documents. And there's a couple of different layers that you can add on to, just like any operating system. So I can add another one beneath it. Just call that solicitation. And I'll actually upload the PMSS2 solicitation. So I'll do that. I'll click in the folder, and I'll click the Add button. And then I can click who I share it with, but first let's actually upload some of the files. PMSS2 was split up into a bunch of different pieces, so you can upload one file, only files at the same time. I'm just going to upload a few, but I'm just going to hold down the Control button and just upload a few of these documents using the thumbnail attachment. And here's what's important. You can control who you share it with. Now, the solicitation you're probably going to share with everybody's public information. But let's say instead this was like a pricing document. Then you can choose to share it with a limited group. To do that, you just select a group, or you can select individuals. And you click the locking button. Now only they can see it. Nobody else who isn't on this list is aware of its existence. And this is, you'll find this functionality with pretty much everything in Kona. When you make an event, you can control who sees it and who can participate. When you make tasks, you control who sees it and access it. Same with conversations. So it's useful and important that way. You can do a couple other things that are useful with files that you can't necessarily do if it was just on a network drive. You can add some notes. So for example, like an interesting note to be here might be to add the FBO link or whatever link the solicitation's posted, so people can know where to go grab it and check if there were amendments and updates. And you can also have a conversation around the documents once you upload them. I'm just going to click Add. It's going to upload those files to the solicitation folder. You can also just upload them in no particular folder and then later sort them into another folder, which is useful. So anytime you'll see as you use Kona that you can upload files pretty much anywhere. You can upload them to an event. You can upload them to a task. And they're always referenced there, but they also show up in the files as unsorted items. And all you have to do is go in and sort the item. See, I just really easily moved one document to the other. So if you ever run into issues in proposal development where people don't know where to organize things, that's not the worst thing in Kona, because you're going to be able to find it really easily just by using the search function or checking where the unsorted one is. And you can put it in the right folder. But that's pretty easy. The next basic thing you'll need, now that you have a space to work in, you have a team to develop the proposal, and you have the files that you need to figure out how to develop the proposal, you're going to need to create some events, some basic best practices that you have in proposal development. Probably you have a kickoff, your 3 color reviews, and set aside some time for production and submission, right? So you have a shared calendar that you can use in Kona, and it's as easy to use as any calendar function probably on your smartphone or whatever email client that you use. And it works pretty much the same way in the files. You control who it goes to. So I'm just going to click Everyone. I can add notes too, so I could add a note on the location. I could also upload a file, so like a useful, well first let's name this. This is going to be our kickoff event. And I can actually attach a file to it. And a useful one to have here might be the kickoff slides. So I'm just going to add the kickoff slides to it. Now everybody can access the kickoff slides, and it also ends up in your files folder. And I can also have a conversation around it. And once you've created it, you just click Add. And you can also set the times here and here to adjust them. So what you want to do in proposal development is make sure you have your team in place, you have all the files that they need, and a folder structure that's going to be useful. And then you're going to want to lay out your entire schedule to make sure it makes sense. I wouldn't worry first about getting your schedule exactly right. I would lay it out in such a way that you can look at it kind of in this month view. And that way you can see how much time you're laying in between review teams. And just as a proposal best practice, that's really important. A lot of times people don't account for enough space between different color views. And typically you're going to need more space between the color views as the document goes on. The space between a pink team and a red team to develop is going to be bigger than the space just to get to a pink team document, right? So laying it out in this calendar view allows you to look at it and kind of judge whether or not you've created a schedule that's going to lend itself to good proposal development. You also have a place to keep files around those events, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, but you'll be able to have all your events stored there. Next function I'll show you, and the most important function, actually requires us to step a little bit out of Kona, and it has to do with a best practice. It's going to require you to analyze the solicitation. So the most powerful functionality in Kona, I think, really, for proposal development is tasking. Like the tasking and the ability to have conversations with tasks. And the reason is it allows you to track all the requirements for submission for a proposal, make sure they're assigned and tracked, and you can monitor the development. But to do that, first you have to collect all the requirements for proposal submission. That's going to require you to read through the solicitation. So this is a proposal best practice. Make sure you read the entire solicitation. Not proposal requirements end up in section L, but not always. Sometimes you'll see them pop up in a bar clause. That's going to require you to put something and doesn't show up in section L. So make sure you read the entire document. Let's take a look at section L here. This is your standard section L from PMS Test 2. And it's going to give you the basic outline that they want to see. All right, it gives you a high-level outline, so you see the different parts of the proposals. You see volume, that's a unit of organization, and then you see subsections. And then when you actually read the instructions, you'll see that they're interested in other things in the subsections. So you can already picture that the government is giving you an outline of where they want to see things and what they want you to talk about in those sections. So what you want to do in turn is to create an annotated outline. Here's what an annotated outline looks like for volume 1. We're just looking at volume 1, not all the volumes. An annotated outline basically takes the government's requirements, puts them in the order that we're confident is going to be evaluated in, and marries up the different parts of the solicitation. So you marry the instructions, what you're supposed to do, with the evaluation factors, how you're going to be rated. Then you can also add other things like items from the statement of work to give some background, and then we also recommend giving guidance to the reader since somebody might be jumping into this and they don't have the full background. We recommend color coding that, but you use the heading function in Word to do this. You kind of make a hierarchy that matches their hierarchy up to the point that they gave it to you, and then you might need to go a couple levels past that. Usually we don't recommend going much past the 4th level. But this is what an annotated outline looks like. And the reason that's important, not just for proposal development, for when you use Kona, is that you structure a proposal in such a way that your outline accounts for all the proposal requirements, at least things that would go into a Word document or would be referenced in a Word document. Then you have an organized way of accounting for everything that has to be done for the proposal. And the way that you account for it is with the outline. So if you look at this section right here, 1.5, knowledge and experience with other relevant DoD acquisition policies. This is an assignment. If you had teaming partners, probably you need to get information from all of them on their knowledge and experience with DoD acquisition policies. But this is basically something that has to be completed for you to submit a proposal, right? So what's great about creating an outline is now you have a number that it's connected to. You know that's 1.5. And you got them all accounted for. So you can look at the table of contents, and basically the table of contents, everywhere there was an insert text, is like a mini proposal, and that's how you should treat it. A proposal in the end is like a project, any other project. It's made up of smaller events that have to be completed to complete the big project. But you got to keep track of all those small events. And the annotated outline allows you to do that. So once you've done that, you have this annotated outline with all these numbers and everything. You go back to Kona and start using the task feature to actually make the proposal work, to actually get the ball rolling. So let's see how you would do that. All right, this is the Task tab, and a useful feature in the Task tab is the folders. They work just like the folders for the files. They're just a holding pen, if you will, for tasks to put under them. But since the solicitations are often broken up into multiple volumes or tabs, a good idea would be to create a folder for kind of those highest levels of organization where you don't have to put content. So volume 1's a big project, but there's a bunch of things underneath it. But it's not particularly useful to have a tab that would just say, do volume 1. A lot of things could slip through the cracks if you do that. A better idea would be to create a folder called volume 1, and then to start to work within it. Okay, going back to our solicitation. Not solicitation, sorry, outline. We can see, let's look at one of the first sections. So first thing we need to do is create some introductory text around this section 1, right? So we need somebody to do that. That's a task that has to be completed. So to create a task for it, what we recommend doing is add a task just by clicking the Add button, assign it to somebody. the person that needs to do it, let's say it goes to Jeff. I'm going to lock it so that it's just Jeff, and I'm just working with Jeff to see it. And then I'm going to add the title, and this is important. When you're adding the title, literally copy and paste in the title that you had from your outline. That makes everything traceable back to the deliverable, which is a Word document or a PDF document, that you'll give back to the government. That greatly increases traceability and accountability for your proposals. That's why we highly recommend doing it. All right. Well, I pasted in the name. And then we recommend adding some notes to it, specifically the annotation. So if we go back to the outline, see we have some section L, some section M stuff, and some guidance to the writer. I can literally copy and paste all of that in, put it right back into Kona. And I can even color code it. So like we recommend color coding your annotation just to kind of trains readers after a while to know what they're looking at. That's really easy. You can just put it in red. Put the evaluation factors in blue. And the guidance in green. I'll show you how that looks in a second once we've created the task. So there's the guidance in green. Click done. And I'm going to add the task. Okay, just give it a second. All right, this is what it looks like when it's up. Another important thing is to add a due date connected to it. So there's a bunch of different ways to do due dates. You could set it to the final date. But what I recommend more is probably lining it up with the first review team that you have and then continually pushing that due date out, as you go from pink to red to gold. But let's say we had pink team on the 23rd. I'm going to need all my documents in by the 22nd, so they know when to do it. So we have a task. Let's click on the task. This is what it looks like. So we know which section it ties back to the solicitation. We know the instructions and the evaluation factors, and we give guidance. And we've assigned it to somebody. It goes to Jeff. Jeff knows he has to do it, and he knows he has to do it by the 22nd. What's really useful about Kona is the conversation feature and the ability to attach files to this. So a lot of proposal development is done in a decentralized environment, right? It's done through emails, live conversations, phone conversations, text messages, everything under the sun. But a lot of things can slip through the cracks because there's no way for people to see the history of a section. And that's frankly how sections don't end up being written as well as they could, or sometimes people forget that they have them. So Kona helps with that quite a bit because you have a single space to discuss a very low level of the project and making sure everything's done. So this is an introductory section. So I can post this up, and a lot of people have different approaches to introductory sections. So I could say, Jeff, do you think this should be a graphic? I can. And then Jeff might say yes. And he might attach a file on his side and actually show me, he could sketch something down and take a picture of it on a cell phone, upload it to Kona, and put it right here so I know what he's looking at. And then we can have a discussion about that graphic. I can bring other people in the task in as well to discuss that. And so everything that's usually been happening through email is now much more concentrated and traceable. The other important thing about this is that a lot of times in proposal development, it's kind of rare that you have an entire team that's available for a full 3-week, 4-week turn for a proposal, right? So a lot of people are jumping into and out of proposals. So you have people jumping in who missed the first review, and then you also have people who are only there for the first review through the first draft, and they're passing something else off to somebody else. So when they're given a task that they're picking up from somebody else, they can look through the entire history of it, which is a lot easier than looking through an email chain, and not that many people forward email chains. So you can see the entire history of a section. This also allows you to develop proposals in a little bit of a different and interesting way. You can still develop proposals traditionally in Kona, where you would have a proposal coordinator collect all of your inputs. You could upload to the file section, you could have a folder for Pink Team called Pink Team. You could create a convention where everybody's going to upload their individual sections. That proposal coordinator could then take the content and put it all together, and you put out your Pink Team. You could upload that file to the events that you have for the Pink Team so everybody has access to it. You could also create a task that is addressed to individual reviewers, telling them which parts of the proposal are used. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You can use tasks, conversations, events. In the end, it's kind of up to you, but the most important thing is that you're using Kona to account for things that sometimes don't get accounted for. And that's where it's really useful. All right. Just showed you basically a high-level concept of how to use Kona, but I went through it pretty quickly. Let me show you what a more final product would look like. Okay. This is what a PMSS2 Kona workspace could have looked like if you were using, and this is what it should look like after the first couple of days. You've analyzed the solicitation, you've built your annotated outline. Once you've done all that and you have an idea of schedule, you can go into Kona and you can build this and basically get the ball rolling for your proposal. Click on the Files tab. See, I have all my documents in there, my government documents, every solicitation. Also, every amendment went under there. I have the outline that I created posted there. And you can also upload other things there, like win themes, which makes it very accessible. A lot of times as a consultant, I walk into environments and I'm very surprised that that a company will often go through the trouble of making win themes. They'll even make really good win themes. But there's a surprising gap for implementing those win themes. And a lot of times it just has to do with nobody, a different team, maybe the capture team created the win themes, and they don't end up with the proposals. That's another great thing about Kona is that it provides files, a way to share files easier or to reference files so that you can ensure things like win themes will actually end up in your proposals. All right, we can look at our calendar here. So for our calendar, you can see how I laid it out. I put a decent amount of space between the review teams so that I know I'll have enough time to recover from those reviews. I left a little less space between Gold Team because usually those are going to be kind of the last minute changes, and I definitely spaced out production. Anytime you have a hard copy submission, you want to make sure that you lay out plenty of times for production. If something can go wrong, it usually does with production. That's just kind of Murphy's Law. And let's take a look at the tasks, which are the most important part. So you can actually use the sorting feature with Kona to sort by folder. And what that does is it allows you, once you've kind of created the folder structure and then also name tasks by where they tie up to the outline, it allows you kind of, as the proposal manager, the space owner, to have a dashboard view of the proposal. So for example, I can look in section 1.1. Okay, I can know what's supposed to go in that section. In this case, it's just guidance. I can know who it's assigned to. I've assigned it to a subcontractor. I know it's due on the 22nd, and I know where it ties back to in our outline. And what's great is we can have a conversation around that. You could actually use the discussion feature to draft and edit text if you wanted to. In some proposals, that might be a bit more difficult, especially if they're kind of table-driven or graphically driven. But if you have chunks of text, you could definitely use this to post your first cut at something, have somebody go back and then copy and paste that down and then edit that cut, or to make changes and suggestions and recommendations. You could work through that entire thing within this section. And that way you keep everything accountable. Okay. So I've kind of spoke about how to use tasks, events, and files. What happens if you need to have a one-on-one conversation with somebody that might not be useful or appropriate to post to the entire world? And you completely do that. You just find the person, you click on their name. I'll click on Jeff again. You can see I can have a one-on-one conversation with Jeff. And I can keep that conversation. It's just between me and him. So you can use Kona exactly how you use email. So you're always able to direct the content to where you want it to go and to limit who sees it. But then it has capabilities that email doesn't have in terms of concentrating everything into one place. All right. A couple of notes in terms of adoption of Kona for using as a proposal. I went through some things pretty quickly today because I just want to give you some ideas and increase a level of awareness of how a product you might already have can be used to alleviate a lot of pain. But there is an adoption period and for any new product that you bring into your workspace. And for Kona, you kind of have to plan out how you do that with a bid. But since I didn't show you how to do everything, they're pretty much, if you had any questions regarding functionality or how to do stuff, Kona has a very useful help button. You just go to the Help Center. I'll load up. You go down to this knowledge space. So if you're having any questions, I went through something really quickly, and you're wondering, how do I do something? You went through it pretty quickly. This will tell you how to do this and a lot more. There are a lot of features in Kona I didn't mention. For example, in the conversations, you can use an @ symbol, just like you kind of see on Twitter, and that brings up somebody specifically, and it pings them on their Kona, and it kind of stands out more. You can use tags, and you can start managing how you use tags with things. Use the hashtag symbol. There's a lot of other stuff like that, but if you ever have any basic questions on functionality, pretty much everything will be covered here that you can look through. And you might be wondering now, what does Kona look like on the other side? So this is kind of the manager's view. So this wouldn't be particularly useful if it was everybody's view, and obviously I showed you that you can control who you give information to and what they've been tasked with. So when somebody logs into Kona and they go into the space, they're only going to see what's been shared with them and what's been assigned to them. And then Kona has a bunch of neat features where it actually controls how things are viewed, so you can see kind of the latest conversation. So if a new conversation was updated, this little bubble up here, this conversation bubble would light up and tell me how many conversations that I've been participating in have been updated. So I know I can go back and look at that. So if I'm only working, if I'm a writer and I only have 3 sections, I only really care about those 3 sections. I can click on this and go see which conversations have been going on that I haven't been a part of. And it's really neat how Kona does that. It's also useful if you kind of think it through. A lot of times you have more than one bid going on. So when you have multiple spaces, I'm just showing you a workspace view. You can also have your own view that shows basically everything across all your workspaces. And you can see that it shows you conversations and tasks across the entire thing. So in that way, you can see Kona being of use not just for proposals, but your wider enterprise. When you try to use Kona to develop your proposals, we recommend starting small in both the bid that you're going after and the team that adopts it. Some of the best ways to kind of adopt a new tool or product is to start with a small team that then become experts on that product, and then it kind of becomes a train the trainer item. So let's say you had a team, you had a core proposal team, about of 3 or 4 people. If you get them to start using it and become familiar with it, and they start with smaller bids, like let's say really small task orders, or you could even use this for an RFI. They become familiar with it. They know the functionality. They become aware of how you want to use it organizationally. And that becomes a very powerful way of adopting this and spreading it out. So if you start small with just your team and you spread out a bit more in your organization, and then you start using those guest accounts to bring in your teaming partners, after a while you'll definitely have the hang of using Kona and you'll reap all of its benefits. There's a lot of scalability to what I showed too, and you want to keep that in mind in terms of adoption. What I showed you is kind of follows my work habits of how I like to do things. I drill down to a pretty low level when I manage proposals. So like I said earlier, this is the entire section 1, right? I wouldn't have a task that just says do section 1. That's not particularly useful. It has to go out to a bunch of different people. But different organizations and also different solicitations kind of mandate that the way you would ask to account for work would change. Some organizations might find that you can just get away with doing this. Other ones might find that they need to break it down even more. So in the section 1.1, earlier I recommended, or the section 1 I recommended to Jeff, maybe we should use a graphic for this. There's a bunch of different ways to go after things. So I could have a conversation where we develop that graphic. I could bring somebody else in the task to make that graphic. Or I could create an entire another tab that says to create a graphic for that and assign it to the graphic designer and bring in the other people to develop it. Whenever you do that, though, you always want to trace everything back to your outline. So the only time you want to have tasks that aren't tied back to your outline is when they can't be. So if you have a pricing volume in an Excel sheet that doesn't get referenced anywhere in a Word document, then you want to create a folder for that, and you want to make sure it's very clearly labeled. Also makes sense to create a folder for things like production tasks. And a lot of times you'll show up in production, realize you don't have enough binders, you don't have enough paper or the right kind of paper. So you can create a folder just for production tasks and assign those to some administrative personnel, so make sure that's done in advance. But at any rate, you can see there's a lot of scalability for how you'd use tasks. Tasks are definitely the most important feature for developing proposals in Kona, but there's also a ton of latitude to how you want to do it. And so the reason you want to start small is you start to get a feeling of how, within your groups and your organizations, what's the level of detail you want to use tasks in, and then you can expand that as you go on and use bigger bits with Kona. That's about it that I had for using Kona. I hope you guys will give it a shot and see how it's used and start small and kind of use its capabilities to develop proposals.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Charlie. This now concludes today's demo. Thank you for joining us today, and please visit deltek.com for more upcoming Deltek events.